We'll start off with tonight's Development and Management Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Mohammed and I begin the meeting with a quick introduction of everyone on the table side of the front. Starting on the right, please.
I'm Joanne Eccles, the Committee Administrator of Pembroke Council. I'm Laura Barnes, Senior Planning Officer at Pembroke Council.
Good evening everybody, I'm Kieran, Library Council for Barrow Bridge and Con.
Good evening, I'm Martin Stone, Councillor for Barrowford and Pendleside.
David Alvin, Borough Councillor for Vivery Bridge.
Sarah Coburn Price, Councillor for Bullsworth and Fulbridge.
David Whip, I'm a councillor for Avey and Coatswood, and can I welcome you to my ward because you're in the Coats part of Barnoldswick, and the application for the 128 houses is in the Coats area of Barnoldswick as well.
Good evening, Councillor Tom Whip. I'm substituting for Councillor Mick Strickland, who is also a Barnoldswick Ward Councillor.
Dorothy Lord, I represent Waterside in Colne. I'm also the lead member for Community Safety.
So yeah, then let's go to the please.
Evening, Yvonne Tennant, Councillor for Marsden and Southfield, and I'm substituting for Councillor Malady.
I'm Emma Barker, I'm the Legal Services Manager and I'm the Legal Advisor for the committee this evening.
Thank you. First item on tonight's agenda, does any member of any declaration he or she wishes to declare?
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a prejudicial interest, but I should declare, well, I'd like to declare that I'm a member of the Avey and Salterford Internal Drainage Board, and they were a statutory consultee for the application for Barnsley Shed.
That's fine, thank you very much. Second item on the agenda, minutes of the previous meeting.
Move them.
We have second of that, please. Thank you very much. Right, planning applications first. The application on tonight's agenda is the erection of 128 dwellings, creation of a vehicle access from Longing Lane and all associated works at site of former Barnsley Shed, Longing Lane, Barnoldswick. We do have two speakers down and only those whose names are down to speak are allowed to speak. Before we first have Mike O'Brien.
Just speak from here?
However you need, yeah.
Yeah, I'll come inside the corner. Do we start now, yeah?
Yeah,
okay. Good evening. Yeah, the application seeks detailed planning permission for 128 dwellings on the edge of Barnoldswick. The settlement is a key service centre and the application site is within walking distance of those facilities in the centre. The application site is part brownfield, comprising the former Barnsley Mill, and the canal forms the southwestern boundary. Outline planning permission was granted in January 2017 for the residential development of up to 148 dwellings. Prior to that, detailed planning permission was granted for commercial uses on the whole of the site, including the greenfield element, and all conditions were discharged, including those related to drainage, and permission was formally implemented through construction of the access point, which still remains. That application is technically still live. As referenced in the officer's report, the employment development has not come forward due to viability issues, therefore the principle of development for residential development is acceptable. The whole site is identified as a draft housing allocation in the emerging local plan for 128 dwellings, and therefore it's deemed to be suitable for development and forms a key part of the forward supply and in order to meet the housing requirement over the next plan period. And approving the site will avoid the need to identify potentially other sites for the emerging local plan. Otherwise, a similar site might need to be found and identified for allocation ahead of the next stage of the local plan to fill the gap in the supply. There are several clear benefits of the proposals. These include the delivery of a policy-compliant level of affordable housing. So the requirement in this area is 5%, which in the report it suggests that this is 6%. Now, despite that, we're actually proposing 7 of the dwellings to be affordable, and these would be indistinguishable from the market housing. Policy Lift 3 of the local plan relates to housing needs and identifies the provision of larger family homes as the highest priority, and given the prevalence of small terrace properties in the borough, and all 28 dwellings would meet that need in a settlement with job opportunities for people of a working age with several large employers. And those larger family houses provide greater flexibility for families, including garden space and the opportunity to work from home. So the proposed layout includes a 10-metre buffer zone to the canal and provides pedestrian access at several points. The trees and the stone wall along the boundary will be retained, and the existing palisade fencing will be replaced, improving the appearance from the towpath. The scheme incorporates house types and materials that are sympathetic to the context and surroundings of the site, and Seddon Homes delivered the Beckside development Salterford, which has been popular. All properties will be provided with the required number of spaces and the access roads adopted. So just moving on to technical points, the matter of flood risk was obviously considered in detail when determining previous applications on the site, and Seddon Homes has sought to address concerns, particularly in regard to increasing flood risk elsewhere, and their consultants have looked at how water can be attenuated on site as part of the revised strategy, and that includes allowing for the one in 100 year storm plus climate change allowance. So, as highlighted in the officer report and our briefing pack, the proposals create an attenuation basin on site which is 19% larger than the existing depression, which collects water on site now. And despite being larger, the ponds will only need to store 63% of the water they do now, that currently feeds down to the culvert on the southern edge of the site. And that's because the catchment zone has indicated that 37% of the water falls directly on the application site, not to the north, which flows down. And it's that water that will be collected, stored and released into the canal at greenfield rates, and the canal travels in a northerly direction away from Salterford and Airlie. So the Canal and Rivers Trust have provided formal approval to this approach, and the additional water will be used positively to feed the canal, and it was welcomed by them. They see it as a benefit. The proposals therefore present a betterment on the existing position. It's 37% less water going into the broken culvert, and the proposed ponds are 19% bigger than the existing storage on the site, and this is in addition to the canal benefiting from the new water source. So there are several photographs that have been shared online showing the flooded fields in the area. Just to clarify, these pictures principally show the field to the south and not the development site itself. They're a completely different field, and the proposed ponds are large enough to accommodate the levels of surface water which accumulate on the application site. There's no technical objections to the proposals, with all statutory consultees confirming that the flood calculations included with the application are correct and the proposals are acceptable subject to conditions, and this includes consideration from the LLFA, the IDB and the Environment Agency. So just to conclude, really, just two final points. The proposals are in line with the adopted development plan and will provide much needed high quality, affordable and market housing in a sustainable location. Seddon Homes is a family-owned business with roots in Lancashire and an excellent local reputation. They also strive to provide homes that are designed to improve energy efficiency and will meet improved building performance standards. Overall, the benefits are plentiful and are not demonstrably outweighed, and we ask that permission is granted.
Thank you very much. Second speaker is Emma. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
You're all right. I've just got some concerns, really, that if I'm understanding correctly, a developer does need to submit plans for drainage, etc.
Chairman,
Yeah.
I think we're just struggling to hear across here.
Sorry, if you could come a bit closer, please.
Sorry.
You're all right. No, if I'm understanding correctly, in British law, they need to submit plans for drainage, but it's not British law to actually fulfil those plans, as in do the work. This is what I've got off another council's, Derbyshire Council's website. So, living in Salford all my life and seeing floods in 89, 99 and 2015, it's a little bit more often than once every 100 years. I'm wondering if the council would enforce, if the plans are to go ahead, that all drainage work and adequate drainage work is done before any development started. That's one of my concerns. And my other concern is the riparian rights. Will they still remain with the developer? Because I wouldn't want to live in an affordable home, so assuming these are going to be like 120,000, I think they call that affordable low home, and then all of a sudden you've got houses in Salterford what are flooded, and you've got people chasing you for the money because you own the land, the drainage works sat on what's bust. So will those rights stay with the development company rather than being passed on to the individual owner? And that's my two questions. That's it. And there is everything else like doctors. I thought there'd be more people here. I've been waiting 5 months for a referral for the doctors, so we're quite short on that. We're short on schools, we're short on employment.
please ask for the agent to come back in? Would you be able to answer the second question that she asked?
I could answer that.
Well, I think
Okay, good.
Go on, there were big councillors in.
Well, the point is, this new paper, they've got to submit a construction surface water management plan. By doing so, they've got to put an element of that infrastructure in to start with, so that they can obviously control the water whilst they're building. So to ask the question, what about were they going to put the drainage in? They've got to put it in initially to be able to construct.
I can answer the riparian question. It does say in the report that the sustainable urban drainage schemes on the site would come under the owner of the adjacent properties, and I believe managed by the management company. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Laura might be able to advise, but there's two conditions. One, details of the drainage strategy once it's complete, and then details of the drainage strategy through the phases of construction. So drainage strategy is completely controlled by those two conditions. And yeah, there would be a management company that would deal with the drainage. It may be potentially offered up for adoption, but I think the likelihood is it would be a management company.
Yes, I think
sorry, Chairman. You need to project, Laura.
yeah,
There's a couple of people over here who can't hear very well.
no problem. So as has been set out, the conditions which we've got on the proposal is that, like Councillor Alvin had said, during the construction phase, the drainage will be managed in addition to once the scheme was built out. So in order to answer the lady's question, the full drainage scheme wouldn't be in place right from the outset, because all of the infrastructure wouldn't be there, and the houses wouldn't be there, and the gardens finished off to that sort of standard. But there would be two conditions within the decision notice to ensure that during the construction phase the surface water is properly managed, and also once the site has been completed.
Thank you. Coleman Price, would you still like?
Yes, please. I'm afraid that I was too slow. I was paying close attention to you when you were rattling through your bit about the land to the north and the drainage that's off-site. I wasn't quick enough to if you could just do that little tiny bit again.
Yeah, so
for me.
You can see on that drawing there the field that's sort of finishes off the triangle to the sort of the right of the red line.
Yes.
And we've done a catchment study
And it's
which
higher.
looks the water, yeah, that falls off. And so the area of the water, obviously as a percentage, sort of 37% of the water in that catchment comes from it lands on the site itself, and the other 63 sort of comes down off the hill. And so what we're saying is 100% of the water currently goes into the culvert, which is broken, hence why the field to the south, which is lower, floods. And so we're saying that we'll take 37% of the 100%, put it in the canal, go in a different direction away from Salterfus. That's a betterment, 37% of the water, and the 63% will be held in a ponds, which are 19% bigger than the depression that's on site now. So it's a significant betterment. 19% bigger ponds, 37% less water.
Okay, thank you. I understand it now.
Councillor Wick.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a few questions for the applicant, Mr. O'Brien. First of all, Mike has just said that the water in the canal flows in a northerly direction, and I did have a conversation prior to the meeting flagging up that I would ask this question. The canal itself isn't a water course. It does act as a conveyor. The closest emergency sluice is actually at Salterfus. So the canal is flat, basically. Water finds its own level. Water is introduced into the canal. It will lift the surface of the canal across the piece, and given that Salterfus is the nearest emergency sluice in storm conditions, water will come out at Salterfus. The question is, how do you know that the canal travels in a northerly direction?
Through liaison with the Canal Owners Trust. I mean, it's their waterways.
Okay. Chairman, I want to comment on that, but I'll do so after I've finished asking questions, if I may.
Yeah, that's fine, of course, yeah.
Could I ask about the field which is undeveloped land? Clearly there's the brownfield site, which is the former shed, and then there's the land beyond, which is the greenfield site. I note in the reports, the site investigations have revealed that that's a mixture of peaty clay, or clay peat, whichever way round you want to have a look at it. Do you know how deep that peat layer is?
There is a cross section in the document, and the peat has been identified, but as the cross section shows, it's only a thin layer, and it's sandy clay underneath, and then bedrock. The full extent of the peat hasn't been identified, and the report says that further work is needed. But the peat that has been identified is only a thin layer.
Okay, Chairman, if I may, thinking about that area of lower lying ground, what would be the intention of the developers in terms of finished levels?
Well, it's quite clear in the application we would be raising it up to the level of the towpath, so it would be a metre high.
Okay, so
Okay, yeah. Just for 1 second.
This is
I might need to put my other glasses on.
Okay, this is a cross section which is taken from the bottom end of the site. So where we've seen previously at the bottom end of the site where the blue
the southern end,
are,
yeah.
This is a cross section from the application pack which indicates how the land level changes.
So, Chairman, either Laura or Mike, looking at that cross section ZZ, is that from west to east, east to west, or is it from north to south?
East to west. It's east to west according to the drawings.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah, that is correct. It is.
Okay, so Chairman, I mean, Racket Eye tells me that the land currently where the soft ground is would need to be raised by approximately 2 metres.
It will vary across the site. As it's not a flat table now, so you know.
Yeah.
So in certain areas it might be 2 metres. Yeah.
Okay.
But the point is the application is quite clear. We've provided finished floor levels on the plans.
So, could I ask, Mr. Chairman, would that capping over the peat layer, which you don't know how deep it is, but would that capping be porous, or would be an impervious layer?
No, it would be dug out, so we wouldn't be capping it. It would be taken out.
So, Mr. Chairman, the peat would be removed.
Yeah, that's the strategy. Yeah.
Okay. And I had one further question, Chairman. I've changed my glasses now, so I have to go back to these ones. No, I'm sorry, I can't find it. I'll come back in if I recall.
Councillor McLaren.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions. I think we missed out one of the questions from Speaker 2 there. I think Laura covered the second part of, I didn't pick up a name, but the second speaker's questions there. There were 2 questions. One was an example of another authority, seemed to be along the lines of plans were submitted with drainage to resolve drainage issues, but it wasn't law to implement them. I can only imagine that if conditions were applied, therefore you can't enforce them. Sounds like a bit of
I
a...
think it must be. I think the conditions relating to this development ensure that whatever drainage scheme submitted is implemented.
I thought that would be the case.
Yeah.
I just think for the person asking the question, it would be worth clarifying that if conditions were put on this by the council, they would have to be implemented.
That's correct.
There isn't a get out clause. So I thought it was just worth covering that for the speaker there. And the other one, I just remember reading the report to, is it Mike, sorry?
Yeah.
In a back and forth email thread with Mr. Cameron, I think, it's quite a small issue, but one of the questions raised was, has climate change been incorporated into the flow rate? And the response seems to have been no, but I think I picked up, you said, yes it has. Which one is it?
Yeah,
I can read out the reply per
climate change is mandatory. Yeah, the FRA is clear that it's 1 in 100 year plus the balance of climate change.
So the answer is yes, it has
yeah.
been. Okay, thank you. That's all for now, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tommy.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, let's see. Flood risk, attenuated 100 years storm. So the proposals, the capacity of the on-site attenuation ponds, roughly 19% larger than the current basin.
19.
Yeah. So that's on the basis that as soon as that basin fills up, it overflows onto the land to the south. From the flood risk assessment report.
The ponds have been designed to be so significant in size that they can accommodate all of the flow that falls onto this catchment, and that even if the culvert didn't exist, they would be big enough to take all of the water. So the fact that the culvert does have a flow, we think it's broken, but it does still take water because it has got to get down to Salford some way. It's like it can still accommodate all of that water, even so. It's they're that big.
Right. But from the flood risk assessment, it identifies the volume of water stored currently on site,
yeah,
based on the basin on the site up to the level where it would flow overland to the south, to the land to the south.
Yeah.
But I mean, we know from experience from seeing the site when it is flooded during extreme events that the surface area of the water creates one contiguous storage reservoir for water, and so it isn't the case that once that basin fills up that the water flows downstream off the site, and in fact the water level rises across the board. And is that accommodated in the flood risk assessment, that it doesn't flow off and there's a higher volume there than just the basin?
Our site is higher than the southern, not by a lot, but it is higher. And as I say, our site will be raised again, the point that's already been addressed, and our ponds are, I mean, I think the current pond is 600, or depression is 630 cubic metres.
Yeah.
We've been making it 747, so it's, and it would be higher up, so it won't, and we're of the view that the study, the calculations that have been done, agreed by the IDP and the EA and the LFA, that won't get to the position where it overflows. It can take all the water that this catchment throws at it.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's the blue area outlined on this.
It's the red and the purple, actually, that's the catchment. Yeah.
So no, the really thin blue line, that's the basin with the 630 cubic metres. Yeah. But I mean, we have photos showing that the field to the south and that basin both fill up and combine into one large reservoir. It's not the case that the basin fills up and then overflows. It's that they both connect as one large water body. And it would, in that case, be larger than that 630 cubic metres.
But in what instance would and does that happen? I mean, I've never seen it like that.
I'm just wondering, has that been considered?
Sorry?
Has that been considered?
Like I say, we've considered the whole of the catchment and the water that flows onto our site, and we've considered it for the 1 in 100 year flood, and you know.
Yeah, I understand. So just continuing from there, the planning inspectorate in its appeal decision in the previous application made reference to the surcharging flows from culverts onto the lower sides to the south, and then surcharging onto this site. That is addition to the catchment area indicated by purple and red on this drawing here, which you would work out to be filling into that basin there. And so the surcharging from those culverts referenced by the inspectorate is different to the overland flows to this basin as shown here. Has that been considered in the flood risk assessment beyond just the catchment area indicated here?
Sorry to repeat this, but it's reliant on no connect. It would work with no connection to the culvert, so it doesn't. It's not. The surcharge. The scenarios are all done with no culvert, no connection to it.
This is in reference to preventing flooding downstream. Currently, the site does retain water during flood events, and that amount of flood storage is on the basis of the water somewhere to go, and that cubic metre volume of water then should be retained on site as it is currently, and that's the point of the attenuation ponds, that they accommodate the same amount of water that the site does now in the future. And from reading the flood risk assessment, it would appear that it only accommodates the flow that goes onto the site and not the surcharging from downstream up onto the site itself. And I'm just really wanting to get a confident answer that yes, those surcharging flows from downstream have been accommodated in the storage area on site for future flood storage.
I mean, as I said, our site is higher, and we've allowed for the 1 in 100 year event, and we've 37% of the water is being taken away, and we're 19% bigger. All of those things together, I think, address the point.
Right. So we've done the canal flows north. The collapsed culvert, damaged culvert, the planning inspectorate mentioned in his decision letter that no evidence had been supplied that the culvert is damaged. Do you have evidence, is there supporting evidence to say that it's not operating as it should? Is it not the case that that culvert is undersized to store water upstream to protect properties downstream? I've seen no evidence to say that that culvert isn't working as it should do.
Like I said, our strategy
It's just you mentioned it in support of the application during your speech, and I just want to make clear that is there evidence to support that?
As I said, we suspect it is broken. We did quite a bit of exploration, but it's just this strategy is just doesn't touch it. As I say, we wouldn't even need an input into it. The ponds are big enough to deal with the water with no connection to it. So whether it's broken or not, the strategy just doesn't matter.
Okay. So just on the point of the 1 in 100 floods, I mean, I've seen the EA model depiction of those flood levels, and I mean, it would appear from local knowledge and certainly pictures we've got. I know on the site visit, councillors encountered a local farmer who had experience of that flood level, and it is quite regularly higher than the 1 in 100 year flood indicated on that EA model system. And that would indicate to me that maybe the EA model isn't quite accurate. Maybe something has changed since those models were done in the surrounding water network. I don't know. But is there sufficient accommodation made in the flood alleviation scheme for the avoidance of doubt around that issue?
Our calculations have taken account of the 1 in 100 year flood plus climate change.
Yeah, but that's based on this catchment, isn't it?
Yeah, that catchment, the other side is lower.
And not necessarily the other surcharging flows that currently go onto the site and allow water to be stored there.
Well, we will be higher, so
I understand that you raise the levels so that the houses will not be
therefore-
flooded from that surcharging water, but my point is that currently water does surge onto there from the field to the south, and that is water stored during a flood event. Would that same water be stored on site? Would it allow to flow onto site as it does now and be retained upstream to prevent flooding downstream?
I mean, like we said, there is a connection to the culvert and then the pond, so it's not like we're breaking the two systems apart. As I say, we're of the view that the ponds could work like that, but there will be a connection. And as I've explained, there's 37% less water, 19% bigger, so we're of the view it could accommodate the surcharge.
Right, okay. I think that's all my questions.
Yeah.
Just to remind members ahead of any vote that's taken, I can see from the West Craven Area Committee, when the application went to the committee for comment, that their recommendation is to refuse the application on drainage grounds. I need to make you aware that there's a briefing note also, which hopefully has been circulated to you, but it explains that the appellant has put together a briefing document, and they've also had council opinion from a barrister to explain that the issues which the inspector found with the reserve matters scheme have been fully overcome, and therefore there wouldn't be any grounds to refuse the application on drainage matters. If it were to be the case, there is a very serious risk of costs, and we know that they also have got the council opinion, so it's very likely that there would be an appeal and a risk of cost to the council, so I need to make all members aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor Tom Whipps asked 99% of my question, but, which is good. I have a couple others. I'm surprised you haven't done a survey of frogmen underneath in that culvert to evaluate the use of it, because it's a key part of the actual drainage.
We did. It's not our field. It's not under our control. So we did get an agreement to get, dig it down there and have a good look around. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, it did appear to be partially collapsed.
Yeah. So you didn't have a structural.
Well, if we'd have tried to improve it, we'd just got the water down the hill faster. We don't want. Yeah. That's not the aim of this strategy, which is why we just left it as it is and dealt with our own water. That's why we are where we are.
Yeah, but to make yourself safe and make a problem somewhere else doesn't help things, does it?
Well, we're not. No.
Well, I was going to go on to say that, I mean, on the north side, that sloping part, obviously the culvert, the open culvert you're going to form, I'd imagine it's going to be a bit of a catchment for that. Anyway,
yeah, and
comes down from the top.
Yeah, it's a cut-off drain around the edge. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But the field to the right, whether you want to call it south or southeast, whichever you want to call it, with the stone wall, I mean, you're going to build your tanks along parallel with that wall to a degree.
Yeah, they're open boundary, not tanks, but yeah, they're open ponds.
Yeah, okay, open ponds. Yeah. But they're going to be up to 2 metres or thereabouts, depending on the field or whatever. But you're then creating an area on the right-hand side, which is in the other field. So water goes in there, obviously. It comes down, because if you look at the shape of the land, it's like a bowl that comes down, it's like a basin. So that could start undermining whatever you've got there.
No, there would be conditions to keep it maintained and managed and structured.
So what happens if there's a pond created on the right-hand side of your land, which is in the field adjacent to the right? Because I believe there would be a problem there, personally. I'm not trying to make a problem, I'm trying to avoid a problem.
Our cut-off drain would pick up the water that would have come onto our site and then bring it into the pond. So if it doesn't end up in the cut-off drain, then it would never have come onto our site anyway, because it's intercepting.
Well, so it does at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, and but our cut-off drain will be around the edge, so it will pick.
So that won't be the same height as your house is in. It's going to be a lower level, is it?
It will probably, yeah, and the cut-off drain is around the edge, at the edge of the site.
Yeah, but is it going to be up at that level of your site?
Well, it's the
or is it going
houses
to be a lower level?
The houses and the roads that will be up. Yeah.
But the ponds, are they going to be lower?
Well, they'll be deep, so it will probably be a bit below and a bit.
Well, okay, so will it catch up the water on the right-hand side of the field?
Well, that's what we were just sort of talking about with the surcharge and that it's sort of coming in. So I mean, there is a connection between the south and our site.
So you would pick it up?
To a certain extent, which is what I was just explaining.
Right.
And the ponds are big enough to do that because of what I've talked about, the 37% less and the 19% bigger.
Yeah, okay. Just hang on. We haven't done the calculations on that field to the right, no?
No.
Yeah, the other one, I think you're going to struggle a little bit in the winter. I hope you don't, but I mean, this construction surface water management plan you've got to do before you start work. I mean, the size of the site you're going to build through the winter. Obviously, you know, it's, I don't know what your program is, but it's probably an 18-month build, something like that. I would have thought maybe 2 years even.
Maybe a bit.
Yeah, maybe a bit more.
Yeah.
So you can definitely have a winter, not two.
Those are rigorously examined. Those construction plans. You'll have to be.
Okay. All right. Like I said, Councillor covered most of the points I was going to ask.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I think as David, Councillor Robin said, a lot of the points have been covered. But what I want to do just for a second is acknowledge some of the residents' comments, the public response. I think it's worthwhile just touching on those. These sorts of meetings are very, very difficult because what is incredibly important to residents and councillors, we are people as well, often the comments totally make sense. However, when it comes to planning applications and what we can decide upon, and I just say this literally, not to sound dismissive of it, but they're just not relevant at times in planning law. We can't make decisions on some of the incredibly important comments. So if I could just maybe ask through Laura and Emma really, maybe if I make a statement and ask you if that is correct. So some of the residents' comments which are important to them.
Chairman, is this a question to the applicant? Because I've got a question for the applicant.
Well, it was a question to the applicants first.
Well, I thought we were asking questions of the applicant before we started getting into deliberation.
Fine, typically just ask it. Fine.
I didn't see a difference there, but some of the residents have written, Laura, that the residents may be impacted by noise and vibration from silent night, mentioned parking issues, increase in off-site flood risk, which we've talked about a lot so far. They've asked what kind of rubble and waste will be used, etc., etc. I won't go through them all, but we can't really make decisions on these comments, can we?
Yeah, through you, Chair. In terms of the issues which are up for debate usually for a planning application, in this case, all of the issues which have been raised were considered at the outline stage and also under the reserved matters application, which subsequently came forward for a larger number of properties. And the inspector had addressed each of those issues on the appeal decision. So in terms of the issues which are now for consideration before members this evening, it's narrowed to just the drainage issues. In terms of perhaps looking at the noise and vibration issues, which I know residents have raised about the proximity to the Silent Night factory. The applicant has undertaken noise assessments, and the environmental health officer for Pendle Council has verified that that wouldn't result in an adverse impact to neighbouring properties and indeed to any future occupants of the development site. It's the same with parking and with highways issues. Those issues were already considered as part of the inspector's appeal decision, Again, we don't have any evidence to refuse an application based on highway issues, because the statutory consultees that we rely on, the experts essentially in each of the different topics, have not raised an issue with any of the things which residents have raised.
Thank you. So I'll come back to officer questions later then. Just to actually absolutely tick the boxes there for I think it's Mike, sorry, terrible with names. I think some of the numbers that I'm listening to there from you, Mike, were 37% less water would flow onto the existing land. You've got a capacity increase of 19%, and in discussions with whoever looks after the canals, they're happy that the water would run away in approximately a northbound fashion.
Yeah, and we would hold on to it and release it at 40 litres per second greenfield rates as well. So it's not just thundering into the canal; it's being held and released like that.
Yeah, and last point there is the culvert isn't within your remit. It's not in your land, and the designs that you put in place exclude the culvert, which does in fact actually take some of that runoff anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wick.
Thank you, Chairman. I remembered the question that I'd forgotten about originally, and I've just got a further one, if I may. And it's regarding the attenuation ponds, which are on the southerly edge of the site. And I just wanted to make sure that I've understood the drainage system, and I think Laura's very kindly put it up. So, as I understand it, and I hope you'll put me right if I'm wrong, the attenuation ponds which are fed by the intercept drain will be at a lower level than the development area where the houses are.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the blue lines that you see running along the new streets,
yeah,
they flow under gravity to a pumping station, if I say in the middle of the site, and then that pumping station pumps the water both from the northern part of the site and the developed area of the southern part of the site into attenuation pond that then feeds into the canal at the 40 litres per second.
I think the pipes are the on-site storage.
Yeah, so
the road,
the big pipes.
Yeah, the big pipes.
Yeah.
But that's only the water that lands, on the site, on roads and gutters and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So the hard surface water, if I can call it that, goes, but all the water flowing off the catchment goes into those attenuation ponds that are at a lower level than the developable area.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And those attenuation ponds along that boundary are connected to the drainage system in the adjacent field to the southeast.
Yeah, there is a connection, but it would be well up the sides of the pond. It's not at the bottom, if you see what I mean. So the ponds hold a certain amount of water before it would the culvert would ever be involved. Does that make sense?
So the ponds hold water and they don't discharge until they're partially filled.
I think that's the approach, isn't it? Yeah.
So what proportion of that storage capacity will be taken up by that water that will stop there all the time?
Being told about 300 mil.
So in cubic metres terms?
About 50.
About 50 cubic metres?
Yeah.
Okay, so 50 cubic metres will be in those attenuation ponds all the time?
No, because there'll be evaporation and infiltration, and that's the point of the strategy. We don't need the culvert. It can, to release the water, there'll be elements of evaporation and infiltration. so it doesn't quite, they don't quite hold, water all the time.
Yeah, they're not like waterproof.
Sorry,
pardon the pun. And my second question, Chairman, prompted by an earlier answer, and you may or not be able to answer this, but what estimate is there for the volume of peaty material that you told us you were going to extract?
It's just really difficult. I mean, we did dig a lot of holes, as you can probably see from the plan and the SI, but we just can't quantify that at the moment.
Any estimate, Chairman? No.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I'm done with questions. I do think it's important to distinguish between deliberation and questioning the applicants.
Councillor Stone.
Chair, my question is for the officers, so I'm happy to defer if we've got more questions for the applicants.
Is there any other questions for the applicants, anyone? No, that's fine. The Councillor Stone.
Thank you. Healthcare, and it was raised by one of the speakers, is of course a very important issue for all residents of Pendle, and particularly access to healthcare. I note that East Lancashire NHS Trust asked for a contribution for this development, and I note also that the officer's report suggests that we refuse that application, and it outlines the conditions, the CIL regulations under which such applications may be made, and the report goes on to say that the officers don't consider that the evidence submitted by the Healthcare Trust is sufficiently robust to justify a contribution. Now, the report talks about a model, an HUDU model, which is used in London, which is not used by East Lancashire NHS Trust. But it refers to it in a way that seems to be approving. Amongst the reasons that, in the officer's report, amongst the reasons for rejecting the application from the East Lancashire Healthcare Trust is that the model does not look at any percentage of the population that may move into the development, that's the new development, who are already resident in the area, thus not increasing the demand on services. I literally do not understand the logic there, because in the development, by definition, increases the number of people in the area, the number of people requiring healthcare. So even if some of the people moving into the development moved in from elsewhere in Pendle, we have to assume that the places from which they moved would be filled by other people coming in to Pendle. So I don't understand the logic of saying that the application from East Lancashire is not robust on those grounds, because that literally doesn't make sense to me. In the paragraph below, it then goes on to talk about the timing of funding, and that the developments can take several years in order to come to fruition, but that once a development is known about, then financing is included in the next budgetary year. That surely is a universal situation, including in London, where this model is used, which apparently does justify funding. So I'm confused and a little bit concerned, because the borough refers to confidential advice from counsel as a justification, which are legally privileged but supports the officer's views. Well, by definition, we don't know what those arguments are, but it seems to me that the borough is taking almost a blanket approach in rejecting applications from East Lancashire NHS Trust. Certainly, and I know we can't consider other applications, but in this case it is rejecting that application on grounds that are really not very clear, and the few points that are made really don't make any sense to me. Saying that it's not a robust enough application, and this is backed up by council, is a little bit vague, and so I just would really like to understand a little bit more about the grounds for rejecting the application from the trust.
Through you, Chair, I mean, the contribution has got to be proven to be directly related to the development. So if people are moving within an area to this new housing development, or then there could be a percentage moving from outside the area in, but you can't prove it basically. I'm sure we would be able to share the council's advice with you. I can check with the monitoring officer if that can be shared, and that might elaborate on the actual reasons why. But because this is pretty much a blanket approach, not just in Pendle but across the country. If you grant it for one development, you're opening the floodgates to pretty much grant it for every single development, because you wouldn't be able to distinguish between developments how you would know how many people were moving into the borough, how many people were moving within the borough. So I think probably the most sensible option would be to see if I can share that advice with you.
Thank you, and that would be helpful. But it is impossible for a healthcare trust to be able to predict who is going to buy those houses and where they're going to come from. So again, I literally, it doesn't seem to make any sense to me. It seems that we're setting a condition which is literally impossible for a healthcare trust to fulfil, if that is what we're saying.
I think you're right. I think it is pretty impossible for them to fulfil, and that's why we will probably never pay this contribution. And
you said it's pretty much a universal approach across the country. So are we saying that, you mentioned this HUDU model in London, is it a different situation in London?
I can't comment. I don't know anything about that model in London, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, I feel distinctly unsatisfied with I don't understand the grounds. I don't think they're very clear, and I feel that residents have a right to be concerned about healthcare and access, and the trust has made that application. Not clear to me why it's been refused, and
I don't think I can elaborate. I can't elaborate any further on the report myself.
Chair, could I perhaps help? In terms of the planning considerations which we have to make, the contributions have to be related and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development, and that's a test which is within the National Planning Policy Framework. And here we're saying that that is not the case, because they haven't met the requirement to meet with that policy. So we can't request an obligation which is unnecessary, because it would be unlawful for us to do so.
I don't understand that. Does this relate to the, the development might take 3 years to build and therefore it's not reasonable? Is that what you're referring to there?
Yeah, that is, yeah. We've got to make the decision based on what the National Planning Policy Framework is asking, and there are tests set out within the National Planning Policy Framework which requires that any contributions sought, whether that's for healthcare or if it were a highways contribution or for school places, it has to meet the tests and be reasonable, necessarily related to the scheme. And in this case, it wouldn't be, because it would be a short period of time before residents were contributing.
I understand, and I'm not trying to shoot the messenger, because I know you're literally interpreting what you need to interpret. I think it's obviously a wider issue.
Councillor Whip.
This one. Thank you, Chairman. I've got a range of observations, I think, and at the end of that I'll put a proposition on the table. I'd listened very carefully to what the applicant had to say, and was very interested in what the applicant had to say in terms of the interrelationship between this land and the land to the south, and the interconnectedness of the drainage. And clearly there has been an inspector's decision on a previous appeal, and the only grounds for refusal at the previous appeal was on the drainage and the impact of flooding elsewhere. I'll come back to that. When this authority considered the outline application for residential development, certainly some of us argued that impact on infrastructure, in other words, doctors and other services within the town were relevant. We were concerned about the noise that there is from Silent Night, and it was interesting when we went along the canal towpath, Councillor Albion and I, with Laura this afternoon, and a representative from the developers, that there was a forklift came along with a skip on its forks, and it made a heck of a racket. It was bouncing away, and clearly the extractors that feed the big sawdust tank, and which is then sucked out into lorries periodically, that makes a lot of noise as well. And we also, Mr. Chairman, were concerned about the habitat, because part of this site is a water meadow, and that supports a rich variety of wildlife. And we were concerned about traffic and the impact that the generated traffic would have, particularly on the traffic lights at the top of Raynell Road, at the crossroads with Essex Street and Fernley Avenue. None of those issues were accepted by a majority of councillors when the outline approval was granted. I have to say I voted against it because I thought that they ought to have been, but we had our chance as a planning authority. We had our chance and we didn't take it. Subsequently, a planning inspector considered the last appeal, and that planning inspector only rejected the application on the grounds of the flooding and drainage. Therefore, the only legitimate, reasonable reason that we could reject this application tonight would be on that flooding / drainage issue. So Councillor Stone, asks about contributions towards the health service. It would be for emergency care rather than local doctors, but none of that is actually relevant, because we cannot now introduce something that wasn't part of the previous appeal decision. So if I can turn to the flooding issue, and I'm going to refer to paragraphs 21, 31 and 32 from the appeal decision previously. So if anybody wants to look that up, beside me reading it out, you'll be able to look at it. First of all, Mr. Chairman, I just want to address the issue of the canal, and the Canal and Rivers Trust, previously British Waterways, previously the Leeds and Liverpool Canal Company, have always had a shortage of water. One of the problems since the canal opened, well, along its full length in 1816, is they run out of water. And part of that issue was because of the Acts of Parliament, which prevented them getting water from the Aire catchment. And as a consequence, from time to time, the canal has to be closed. Where the Summit section, they don't have enough water, they close the locks and they stop the water, they stop the boats. So the Canal and Rivers Trust will be delighted to get 40 litres per second of water getting pumped into the canal. It helps with their water shortage. However, in flood conditions, the water acts as a conveyor and the water cascades out of the emergency sluices. Now, in this neck of the woods, we've got two emergency sluices. One is at Greenfield, and when that emergency sluice is working, and certainly Councillor Togwip and I have both seen it in extremis, the water flows down into the Greenfield area, and it's the worst I've seen it in the last decade. It was literally that far off flooding properties. So down in the Greenfield Basin. So if you add more water and it comes out at Greenfield, then there's a risk of flooding properties. The closest emergency sluice is at Salterford. So one of the arguments being put forward by Mike O'Brien was that 37% of water won't go into the catchment where it flows to the southeast, but it'll be pumped into the canal, and by some magic the water will flow to Greenfield, which is further away, rather than coming out of the emergency sluice at Salterford. If it comes out of the emergency sluice at Salterford, it ends back up in the same water course as it would as if it was coming straight off the southeastern part of the site. The consequence of that is that that water course then goes into Earby, and I don't think I need to tell councillors, because we'll talk about it on Monday of this week, how prone Earby is to flooding. So rather than the water necessarily disappearing off towards Leeds, it could well go towards Salterford, because, like, you know, canal's flat, you lift the water level, it lifts the water level along its length, not, you know, just like it's into stream. And I challenge the question of the water flowing north, because apart from a relatively short period of my life, I've lived overlooking the canal, just a little bit north of where the plan is there. And I know from observation over decades that sometimes the water moves that way and sometimes the water moves the other way. it doesn't constantly in the direction part of the site, and you can see there that the water level on that wall is quite considerably higher than the water level shown. Is it possible to go back to that one? So, if I may, Chairman. So, that's the line. Sorry, I'll come into this bit. That's the line of this wall here. You can see the extent of flooding in this area here, which extends across an enormous area, and you can see that the water level is approximately halfway up that wall. And sorry, I've come back into the light. I don't want to fall off. There is not within the bound of the blue line, which the consultants for the applicant are suggesting is where the water ponds. So I will go back to a different picture. All these pictures are taken by myself. That's the water to the southeast, which extends over here, and this is the water on the application site, which extends considerably that way. And I show a final picture, which is taken on a different day. This shows extends the. So I'll pass these around, Chairman. You can see there's a little bit of water on that side, but the whole of that area is flooded. And if you look at the vegetation on site, you'll see that it is typical of a with the grasses that come around it. I'm going to come back off the stage now. I'm frightened of falling off it. So I'll pass those round and everybody can have a look at them. Tom Whip has done some calculations based on the height in those pictures, and he'll tell you about that himself. I just want to point out the investigations, as has been confirmed by the applicants this evening, showed that there is peaty sand, peaty clay, clayey peat, sandy peat, whatever you want to describe it as, a mixture of peat and other things. And that peat has built up over thousands of years because of the nature of the land. It's a basin and it holds water. And if you look at the flooding, if you look at the area of vegetation that is typical of wet land, then that covers an area, according to Councillor Tomwitt, who's measured it, of 8,000 square metres. I think that's your figure? Thereabouts. Yeah. So if we just make an assumption that the average depth of that peat is 0.5 metre, the applicant is unable to say how deep that peat is, but if we said it was 0.5 metre, that means that there are 4,000 cubic metres of peat within that land area. Now, at the site visit today, Laura, Councillor Albin and myself attempted to walk across that area, and they'll tell you themselves what we experienced, but we got very wet feet. It literally is a sodden bog. We don't know how deep the bog is. We were going to send Laura straight across to find out, but we took pity on her and we didn't think her wellies were deep enough, big enough. So if you reckon there's 4,000 cubic metres of peat, and peat absorbs water, how many cubic metres of water are held within the peat? We don't know, the applicant doesn't know. However, it's got to be something, and given the bogginess of the land, I would say it's got to be quite a significant something. So in terms of the storage area of that land, you've got to take into account the amount of peat. And what's going to happen to that peat? That peat's going to be dug up and removed, and it's going to be replaced by inert material, material that isn't as absorbent as peat, and obviously strong enough to build a house on and build your roads on and everything like that. So not only is that 2 metre layer of tipped material imported into the site going to take up the space that water currently sits, but it's also going to prevent any storage below or at surface level, because there isn't going to be any peat there. There's going to be another up to 2 metres of land because it's going to be filled. I think, Mr. Chairman, there is a very big question mark about the consultants' numbers based on what is clearly a much smaller area of flooded land than is actually the case. And Councillor Alvin will probably come in on this one, but whilst we were there, we walked across the site, we got to the other side, and the only way off the land was going through a farmer's field. And I'm untying the gate, you know, in the very sort of way that you do when you're trespassing.
Trespassing.
Yes, thank you, God. When you're trespassing, you know, you're undoing farmer's gate. And I was just joking, and I said, this is when farmer comes along and finds it cutting through. And lo and behold, at the top of the lane, there is the farmer. And he walked down to us, he accosted us, and he said, "You should have come a fortnight ago." He said, "It were flooded from over there to over there, and it came right up to this gate." And I have to say, his description, it exceeded the worst picture that you see there. So had we gone a fortnight ago and seen it in flood conditions, then we would appreciate just how much water flows onto this land. Not from the catchment area, the purple and red the area indicated here, but flows onto this land from the land to the southeast, which is obviously a much bigger catchment area and goes right down to somewhere colloquially known as Bob Preston. And there's a stream comes in and it builds up. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands of cubic metres of water in that area, and some of those cubic metres of water flow onto this land from the land to the southeast, downstream, not upstream, not catchment, but downstream of the site. And that is a critical point, and that is the point that the inspector at the last appeal said had not been satisfactorily dealt with, and that's going to be the basis when I come to it of actually moving a proposal to reject this application. If, Mr. Chairman, this development was built as shown, then it would displace a huge amount of water which would be added to the volume of water downstream. Now, the land is like a lake. In fact, somebody commented to me today. They said, well, what they're going to do for 3 months a year where the land is a lake, because that person recognises that it is a lake, and the huge amount of water that there is there could not be accommodated in the small attenuation areas that have been set out. And in any event, they're going to fill up from the land to the southeast, because they're connected. So water finds its level. You can't have water at one side here and other side there. It's got to come up and be level across. Mr. Chairman, the planning application is for, and I quote, access from Long Ing Lane and associated works at the former Barnsley Shed, Long Ing Lane. Ing is an old English word for a water meadow. So when people were first naming things in our area, they said, oh well, this is an ing, it's a long ing, because it's a long expanse. And just to the north of here, on the opposite side of the canal, before they built the canal, the land there was called Little Ing. So obviously it must have been a smaller bog. But the northern edge of this site is the watershed. The canal bridge there is a crossover bridge. The watershed, the towpath is always on the low side, and whenever there's a crossover bridge, it means you've crossed the watershed. So all the land here flows into the River Aire, and it flows into the River Aire through Earby. Earby floods. Earby floods on a frequent, Earby floods on a regular basis. The flooding in Earby is alleviated by upstream storage in this area here. So if you reduce the volume of upstream storage, then it means the flow through Earby increases, and we've got away with flooding, in a matter of millimetres. So it's marginal. You get a little bit of an increase in the water level, and you've got catastrophic consequences. On Monday, councillors, and I apologise for people who aren't aware of this, on Monday, at Pendle Council's full meeting, we were debating creating upstream storage on another tributary of the Earby Beck, on the Wengate Beck, and talking about spending millions of pounds to create upstream storage. Here we have natural upstream storage created by nature, created by the glaciers, created over thousands of years, that keeps thousands of cubic metres of water from going into Earby, and then it's released slowly over a period of time when it isn't that extreme flood circumstances. So there is a real risk of flooding affecting downstream properties as a consequence of this development. Mr. Chairman, I think I've covered the points that I wanted to make. If this development was confined to the former site of Barnsley Shed, I accept the land has been lifted there, and it was lifted when they built the mill, and that storage area for the water is no longer available. What is critical is this land, greenfield land, that does act as a water meadow, that is a water meadow, and does provide space for water. And I think it's absolutely imperative that we maintain that flood storage area in order to reduce the risk of flooding downstream. So, Mr. Chairman, if I can refer to, I don't think I'll be able to see it, to be honest. If I can refer to the, of course it's gone off now. What's it on? Oh. Where is it? That's there. Right, so paragraph 21 of the inspector's decision refers to the surcharging of the existing culverts contributing to standing water on the site. And there's reference to the insufficiency of the 225mm pipe lying to the eastern side of the site, which is a point that Councillor Tomwick made earlier. And it goes on to say, these flows would otherwise flow across the site. Calculations for the catchment of the central drain also indicate a requirement for an upgrade of its culvert should it be retained. I think the application actually addresses that issue, but it does not address the surcharging from the south and east, and that's part of the previous inspector's decision. And then paragraph 31, and this is the reason for refusal. Firstly, surcharging from the south and east, which is downstream. So the second part is that the degree of information provided would not meet the requirements to adequately assess discharge rates and volumes, both pre and post development, nor provide sufficient information in relation to temporary storage facilities or the methods to delay and control surface water discharge from the site and measures to prevent flooding of the receiving watercourse. There is limited detail in relation to the suggested off-site works and whether they would ensure adequate discharge of surface water without causing flooding. There is an absence of evidence to demonstrate that the proposed drainage regime for the site would not cause elevated flood risk elsewhere. This would include land identified as at risk of surface water flooding by the Environment Agency. It would not therefore meet the requirement of policy ENV7 of the local plan for Pendle, and I think I need to insert the word saved there. Laurel, correct me if I'm wrong. And I think this is still the relevant paragraph. Paragraph 167 of the revised framework, that's the National Planning Policy Framework, as they require that the design of new developments must consider the risk the proposed development may pose to areas downslope / downstream. So I move refusal on the basis of those reasons, Mr. Chairman, and I'll give myself a rest now.
20 seconds.
Thank you, Chairman.
Before I do bring you then, sorry, can I bring Laura in first?
No, I think we need to second it.
Oh, you just second me, or do you want to speak?
No, I do want to speak. Yes.
Then let me bring Laura in first then, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Seconding it before bringing the officers in, I think is the, if that's all right with you?
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would second that, and that is on the basis that raising the ground levels there would displace water above and beyond the height of the basin identified in the flood risk assessment. And I don't think we've seen adequate evidence that the displacement of that water would not risk further downstream of that section of land. We don't know the relative risks of properties immediately adjacent to that current lake and the amount that would rise. It's also of note that the flow rate into the canal is the exact same as the previous application. And I accept that the statutory consultee, the Canal Rivers Trust, is fine with that flow rate. But I don't think it has been adequately shown to me that that flow rate is safe for properties downstream. I think that the Canal Rivers Trust, as rightly pointed out by Councillor David Witt, hasn't fully considered the consequences of that 40 litres per second discharge into the canal when it's already full, and the outflows then that it would have at the Salterford and Greenberfield sluices. Yeah, so it's for those reasons that I do second this motion to refuse this application.
Thank you, Chair. I think I need to explain that the applicant has done significant work since the appeal was dismissed by the inspector, and I think it's evident from the information that we've heard tonight from the applicant that they have instructed an expert team of professionals who their day job, day in, day out, is to look at flood risk and alleviation strategies. With respect, I think in this case we cannot make a decision based on anecdotal information, and we have to accept that the experts and our own statutory consultees, in the strongest possible terms, have expressed to us that we should recommend the application for approval. So I do need to remind you that there's a significant risk of cost here, and that planning applications must be determined on evidence that is before us. Supposing the application were to go to appeal, we have absolutely no evidence to the contrary for what the developer or our own statutory consultees are saying to us. And I would remind you that we have to base the determination of a planning application on the evidence that we have. In this case, the evidence is anecdotal and not sufficient to be upheld at an appeal. So there is a significant risk of cost to the council.
Well, thank you. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Oh.
I'll just say it.
Thank you. So I have been all over the place tonight listening to this, and the last time this came up I voted against this application, pro the development on the Barnsley shed element and against the other area. So in a sense that vote was correct then, but I've listened very carefully to what Laura has to say, because of course this forum doesn't begin to encapsulate the complexity, and I do understand the importance to Earby, so I understand why there's been this focus on this, because it is so important to Earby. So I'm sort of a bit like this, but at the beginning of the meeting, David Whip said that he's a member of the Earby and Salterford Internal Drainage Board, and they're a statutory consultee, and they say they have no objections. So I was just wondering, how did those conversations go? If they have no objections, what was their reasoning as the Earby and Salterford Drainage Board? Because they're so close to it, aren't they?
Is that something you'd like to ask Councillor Witt? Would you?
I would refer Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price to the correspondence on the planning portal. I can't endeavour to summarise that. The fact is that there was quite a lot of toing and froing, and the engineer for the Internal Drainage Board raised quite a considerable number of concerns. It's not an issue that was actually considered by Internal Drainage Board members.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cleverer.
I thought that was a very good question. I wasn't understanding myself. Maybe you phrased it. Yeah, I didn't understand the response, but it doesn't matter. Just a couple of box-ticking exercises again, if I may. Laura, we've got the amendment to the, well, they got the notification today that condition 31 had been amended. Just for my own sanity there, it talks about the provision for schools, which has been removed. That, in total, there are no provisions for schools in any other condition. That was just a typo or somebody.
Yeah, through you, Ted, that's correct.
Just total mistake.
There isn't a contribution sought by LEC in terms of school places at all. There is something which is in relation to highways, and there's a condition in there which relates to a section 106 contribution which would be required. So there is an update to condition 31.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll just give notice of an amendment then. I think it's worthwhile hearing what the councillors have to say first. So, we had the objections. There were no statutory bodies objecting to this application. Everybody's happy.
That's correct, yeah.
That's correct. And you mentioned a word that I'd written down a few times there. Just for absolute clarity, if this went to appeal, assuming that the what was moved by council with there was successful, what would carry more weight? Councillors' anecdotes or the professional reports that we've received?
Through you, Ted, in the case of an inquiry scenario, there would be an inspector from the planning inspectorate who's not based in this area. There's inspectors all across the country, and it would be an independent inspector who would make the decision. They would have to have before them information which is based on the professional reports which have been put together and the body of evidence which has been collated to submit this application to Pendle Council, and we couldn't rely on anecdotal information.
As important as it is, we've seen the pictures, but we have to rely on what Mike was saying earlier and looking through the reports. The engineering works take care, for want of a better phrase, of the issues that we've seen both recently that the farmer mentioned. I know he is yet, but as Laura's explaining, we have to go off the report, and it takes care of the recess in the ground that created the lake there. Essentially, the engineering works will take care of that. I noticed in the report by Killian Garvey there from King's Chamber, points 24 through 27 talk specifically on this issue, that the engineering works will replace the depression storage as seen in the images there and create the necessary runoffs to alleviate exactly that reoccurring. I think that's what I'm reading through those points there.
That's correct, yeah. The opinion which the applicant has shared with us is the opinion from a barrister at King's Chambers who has confirmed that the current scheme which is before the council does fully address the issues which the inspector brought up in the dismissed appeal.
Just to use your words, it fully addresses them, sorry you said that.
Probably or does.
No, it does.
A couple more points. Do we have any, I was looking through the portal there, I subbed onto this quite late, but I did read most of what was in front of me. Are there any outstanding assessments or surveys, such as noise, bats, wildlife, ecology surveys, which throw these into the air in other areas and other committees I've sat on? Is there anything like that outstanding that could derail this project?
No, through you, Chair, I think the set of conditions which has been put forward in the update report would deal with all of those issues.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think I'm in two minds. I did place. Does anybody else want to speak? Sorry.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
I'll put on notice.
That's fine.
An amendment.
Yeah, I've got mixed feelings, to be quite honest with you. I've no problem at all with the old former Barnoldswick shed site at the beginning, but I still have concern. Has the council employed any specialists to actually check out the calculations from Paul Waits and all the other specialists?
Yeah, Chair, could I explain? So the process which we have in place through the planning system is that an applicant will put forward information as part of the submission documents, and then the council, Pendle Council, goes out to statutory consultees, of which would be the Environment Agency, the Leeds Local Flood Authority, the Canal and River Trust, and others, and they are the appropriately qualified experts in those areas, you know, whichever discipline it is, and they would have made an assessment and interrogated the information which the applicant has put forward to us, and they provide comments back to us.
Yeah. Again, my concern, I know myself, I've been involved in a number of things similar to this, and they have to make an element of assumptions. It depends how many assumptions have been made to be able to qualify their calculations. My other concern is the existing culvert, the condition of it, because if that collapses or fails, then what's plan B? Because nothing's going to get away from there, basically. So, as much as I'd like to see the scheme go ahead, because I do back development, I just feel that I've got a few concerns, even though that they feel that they're addressed. I think they're nearly there in my mind, but not quite. I just do have some other concerns.
Chair, if I could respond to that, I think the applicant has set out from the outset that they intend to have two systems of drainage, the one to the canal and also the one which is to hold the water on the site. And I think it's clear from the assessment that they've made and from the figures which they've quoted to us, the proposed application site wouldn't result in a worsening downstream of the current conditions.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Tom, do you still wish to?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to come back in after a comment made by Laura. Just referencing anecdotal evidence. Chairman, it's the lived experience by local residents as well as common knowledge that this field floods. It floods regularly, and it floods to the extent shown in the photographs shared. Chairman, the flood risk assessment has been done on the basis of EA studies, which are publicly available, and on the basis of the 1 in 100 year flood simulation, if I can put it that way. Chairman, the 1 in 100 year flood, that's a 1% chance of this flood event happening. Chairman, the flooding that we see in the pictures and the flooding remembered by residents of the area in 2020 and other times far exceeds that 1 in 100 year floods. It is closer to the 1 in 1,000 year floods modelled by the year, and it is on a regular occurrence. And there is that discrepancy there between the lived experience of residents and the EA flood models, which this flood risk assessment is based on. So I just want to make clear, it's not anecdotal evidence per se. It is the lived experience of residents, and I think that that discrepancy should be challenged. I don't think we should blindly follow a flood risk assessment that's based on EA models that don't match up with what residents see in reality. So I just wanted to put that there, Chair. I don't have anything further to add.
Thank you. Councillor Storm.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to further explore Councillor Whip's point about the fields south and the reduction in storage, water storage capacity on the site. And I'm minded to go back to, I note this section here that Sarah pointed out, where it says the Environment Agency, EAB and Salterforth Internal Drainage Board, of which, Councillor, you declared an interest, and Leeds Local Flood Authority have no objection to the development in terms of flood risk subject to conditions. So my question to Chair through to Laura perhaps, or even, I don't know whether the applicant has any comments on this.
Mr. Chairman, it's not appropriate to bring the applicant in after we've finished with
All right, I shall ask Laura.
You could let the applicant speak.
Did the points that were raised by Councillor Whip, is there a reasonable expectation that they have been considered as part of the drainage reports?
Yeah, it's my opinion that they have been fully considered as part of the calculations which have been made from the flood risk experts who've put the information together, and with our own consultees who independently looked at this scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll move to the amendment then. I think what the questioning that I put to gentleman before was just to clarify that this scheme that they're going to put on the site will reduce the current volumes of water by, I think it's cited at 37%, got a 19% additional capacity. I'm listening to both councillors with about their anecdotal personal experiences, but as Laura's highlighted to committee members, well, putting words in Laura's mouth, much like the public consultation comments, we can't consider that. So my amendment would be to delegate authority through planning, ask them to review in depth all the flood alleviation measures and reports, and delegate the approval upon their satisfaction that they are accurate and would satisfy the councillors.
So would that be them commissioning their own report?
No, I'm not asking them to do that. I'm asking them to review unless you suggested to do that.
That's quite a good idea.
I wasn't going to, but I will accept the friendly amendment there then. So we commission a report independently on the site, and also ask them to review the current reports and delegate the approval upon their satisfaction of said report. Would that help? Would you support that?
Chair,
I feel like we can't refuse it because Laura's telling us we're in dire straits.
Can I bring Laura in first, sorry?
Yes.
Go on, Laura, sorry.
Chair, I think the purpose of having the statutory consultees already having reviewed the scheme, the Leeds Local Flood Authority and the Environment Agency, Canal and River Trust and the Internal Drainage Board, is that they have all looked at the scheme in detail from their individual specialism. So I don't think that it would be appropriate for the council to fund some sort of additional assessments of that, because that's not the usual process for planning applications.
So it wasn't going to be my initial amendment, so I'll amend my amendment then. So I was going to delegate approval, ask the planning officers to review all existing technical reports, look at the site again, and upon their approval, approve. And that's a sensible thing to do. I think if we just approve as it doesn't satisfy the residents' concerns as much. I think at least if we ask the officers to double check, cross the T's, dot the I's, ensure that these runoff rates and storage volumes are accurate for that site. If they're happy with all the technical reports, they're much more qualified than I am, or anybody in here. If they're happy with it, we should approve.
I'll second that.
I think the risk is clear. We have the reports that say that the site is sound, and if we do refuse, we're going to take costs. I think that's crystal clear.
Am I responding to the debate, Mr. Chairman, as a mover of the original resolution?
Yeah, you can't do it unless.
Unless, I mean.
Is there any other speakers on that? Go on then.
Thank you, Chairman. I've heard quite a lot of what both Laura and the members opposite have said when we discussed this application the last time round. I've heard that the experts, the consultants, the statutory consultees, the Environment Agency, the Internal Drainage Board, the lead local flood authority do not oppose. Pendle Council, as planning authority, turned it down. It went to a government inspector. Our planning manager contacted me to say that the council's consultants could not draw up a case to oppose the development. And he threw it over to me and he said, can you put a case forward? So little old David, with no qualifications to his name, put a case to the government inspector. I included pictures which are not anecdotal evidence. They are not councillors' anecdotes. They are proof of the flood levels that occur in that area. I explained the problem was not with the catchment area, which is shown here in purple and red, but with the water surcharging from the land at a lower level. I'm no consultant. I might have been dealing with flooding for 40 years in both Barnoldswick and Derby and quite a few other places. I might have been hands-on in the middle of the night dealing with flooding. I might have done all of that, but it doesn't give me any qualifications. It might give me some competencies, and I think it's about time that people thought about competent opinions and competent comments rather than just dismissing as being anecdotal. The last time around, our planning manager said, we do not have a case. We can't put forward a case. He threw it to me, you'll have to put forward a case, David. I did. What did the planning inspector do? He threw it out on the basis of the case that I put forward and the case that I am putting forward together with colleagues tonight, because that is the reality of the situation. Displacing all that water and effectively moving it downstream threatens properties downstream. Paragraph 167 of the National Planning Policy Framework says you've got to take that into account. Mr. Chairman, I hope that the committee will reject the Conservative proposal and back the refusal. And if I need to put a case together, ably assisted by Councillor Tomwick now, with getting letters behind his name, then that's what we will do, because there is a good case, and every resident in this area who knows how extensive that flooding is, the farmer who lives overlooking it, who said a fortnight ago it was just water from end to end and the full width, they know what the case is, and this isn't anecdotes, this is hard evidence of what the problem is. So, Mr. Chairman, as we move to the vote, I appeal to colleagues on this committee, support the refusal, reject the amendment, and let this lady over here come to a second item on the agenda, because she's been waiting very patiently. So let's move to the vote and let's make a decision. So the amendment is, Mr. Chairman, I asked, Am I summing up? Yes, I am. Does anybody else want to
Just move on
speak?
to the
No,
vote.
they didn't. I summed up.
I move the amendment. Right,
We'll just move on to the vote on the amendment. Yeah,
I
yeah.
can summarise my amendment, can't
You can actually reply to it.
I can reply to the
Oh,
amendment.
reply to the date.
Father is man, we're on to the vote.
It's fine. I think, obviously what Councillor Wood's saying is quite emotive, however, I'm going to reiterate what is clear in the reports. The advice, sorry?
Emotive? Of course it's emotive.
Well, I felt like I was being berated for 10 minutes there, so it was emotive. Sorry? Thank you. Thanks for your permission. So it's clear from the reports that we've got at hand, the discussion that's taken place. Mike's here to discuss and give us his evidence there. And the comments from Laura, the words that I picked up on and asked you about earlier were the measures, how I phrased it, do they fully cover the concerns? And the response from the experts are that the measures fully cover the concerns. Not partially, not maybe, they fully cover them. That's the decision that we've got at hand this evening. If you read the report from Kingsley, I think it is there, again, bullet points 24 through 27 cover the issues raised in the images that we've been looking at. That won't happen again. They're going to raise the land, they're going to introduce the storage, the drains. That's what they're saying. The rainfall will be the same. There's more storage on the land, 19%, and 37% will be diverted. It's not going to all of a sudden receive more rainfall onto that small patch of land. So, I totally disagree with the notion that we have to reject. I think the costs are clear. We will be accepting costs if we refuse this application. We should delegate, as I've prescribed, to the officers to undertake a review of the reports, and if they're happy with them, to approve the planning application pending another review by the officers. That is the sensible decision to take. That's all I've got to say.
We'll take a vote on the amendment that was moved by Councillor McGladry and seconded by Coleman Price. All those for? All those against?
Yep.
Let's take the vote again.
Yeah, we'll do that once again then. All those for the amendment that was moved by Councillor McGladry. Then all those against the amendment. Is that carried then? That's carried then, thank you very much.
Can you speak on the
No, good.
Chairman,
Yeah?
before we move on to the next item, is it possible that a little thinking could be put into the agenda? And this lady has waited several hours now.
I didn't think I was going to go on for that long with there being two speakers. If
No,
I would have moved that
I
forward.
know, but it's only a smallish item,
Yeah.
and the other one was a big
bigger one, yeah.
application, you know, and it's just a shame that,
She's had to
you
wait
know,
that long.
she's come from Nelson and she's had to wait all this time.
Mr. Chairman, we're still mid-vote. Amendment has been,
Okay, now response.
you've approved an amendment. You now need to put that as substantive motion. I wish to put an amendment to the substantive motion.
It was carried as an amendment, so you now vote on the
Yeah.
on
So, Mr. Chairman, it's now a substantive motion. I wish to put an amendment to the substantive motion that's now on the table.
So we're taking a vote on that.
Yeah?
It's too late.
Yeah? Right.
Can you do that
So-
mid-vote? Do you have to put an amendment
Yeah.
before the vote? You can't put an amendment
Well,
to an amendment mid-vote, surely.
read and understand them. I can't stress that enough. It is now a substantive motion,
Yeah,
and I have the
that's-
opportunity.
yeah.
Quiet. Read the standing orders, read them and understand
That's
them.
what I'm reading.
So it's a reference to COVID. Jackie Weaver.
Aye.
I'm trying to understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is a simple one, and that is that following the review as requested by the amendment that's now the substantive motion, that the issue is brought back to committee. So it's simply following the review that the issue is brought back before the committee.
Just a question.
I move.
Just a question on that, please, then, Chairman. My amendment was delegated authority. I don't believe you can delegate authority for approval and then bring it back. So it's just a technical question.
It'd have to
My
be,
amendment was clear that it was delegated approval.
yes, the amendment would have to be following the review.
It'd have to be a refusal with another committee meeting, wouldn't it?
It'd have to come back to committee with no decision having been made on it.
So it's not.
It's not your amendment.
Yeah, so it's not, it wouldn't be delegated authority.
Yeah, exactly.
That bit'd have to come out.
Yeah, so what I'm proposing is that following the reviews requested by Councillor McGrath and his colleagues, that the issue put back to committee so that...
For decision.
Yeah, yeah. And that's perfectly
Yes.
legitimate.
Do we have a seconder for that?
I will second that.
Can I comment on the amendment? I think it's unnecessary. I think the amendment that I made put the case back in the hands of the experts at council to review the technical files. I don't think that another committee meeting for a couple of hours to review a decision that's already been made. The officer's report has already said that all areas have been covered. Why would another review by the... I was just delegating authority, asking for a review to cross the T's and dot the I's. The officer's report will be exactly the same. It'll just be, please see below report that's already been submitted. So those would be my comments, that what's being asked is to send us the same report again, essentially. So I think let's looking at other numbers.
Can I come in and ask Emma a question? Because the amendment that was passed was for delegated consent. Councillor Whip's amendment for something that's already passed is essentially rescinding that amendment.
No, it hasn't. The planning application has not been passed.
Yes, not.
The amendment's been passed.
Yes.
Delegated
And you can seek to move amendment once that becomes a substantive motion. We just established that. It's perfectly possible within the standing orders.
Yeah, the vote was to make the amendment the motion, which can then be amended, if that makes sense.
So
I'm not seeking to negate.
So yeah, I agree with what Martin was saying. I think to bring it back to it's the same issue that Council Whip's trying to make there. I'm asking the officers to review again the technical files, make sure that they've considered their opinion in the report that says approve. If that's the case, then approve. What's the point in bringing it back to another committee if the officer's recommendation remains approve? We might as well just delegate it and get it done and dusted, because we're all going to be sat here with the residents again with the same outcome. So I would plead to members to make the same vote that we did on my my amendment and refuse the new amendment. There's no need to come back if the officers again approve.
That's my Councillor Tom Wick.
Thank you, Chair. My comment really is that if what Councillor McGuire is saying is the case, that it would just be crossing the I's, dotting the T's, and that nothing would change, what is the point of asking the officers to consider a review? He's made his case very clear that he believes that the report is accurate as set out, and will just be approved by the officers on delegated authority. Why in that case would he not just vote down the proposal to refuse and therefore accept this application? Obviously he thought there was merit to a review being carried out, and that review may upturn something that would cause a non-approval decision being made by the delegated officers.
I don't think that, just for clarity, I think...
Well, no, clearly by the case of asking for a review to be done, it's left it open to being a positive or a negative decision.
You're putting words in my mouth. I wanted the officers just to check that they were happy with the decision, right, and to approve.
Chair, can I not be interrupted, please?
Well, don't put words in my mouth then, please.
I'm not making words in your mouth. I'm just saying that a review is on the premise that there's not only one decision coming out of that review. A review is on the basis that there can be multiple outcomes, Chair. And I think that is the case of the currently substantive motion. It's therefore absolutely relevant to amend that to say come back to committee, because the idea of delegated authority with delegated consent is no different than coming back to committee after review as well.
Any other speakers before we move to vote on that? So the vote on the amendment, which was moved by David Wick and seconded by Tom Wick. All those for? All those, that's one, thank you. And against?
Well, that's lost, that amendment.
So back to
Now go back
my
to
amendment.
substantive motion.
Did you confirm the shows?
I thought there were. Did you vote?
Yeah.
That was gone. Did
5
you
to
vote?
5. Did the chairman
Then the
confirm?
chairman voted. Yeah, against.
So we're going to bring it back to a committee?
No.
No,
No, it's going to be
No,
on
he
the...
voted against the
you
amendment.
lost.
The
Chairman's
amendment lost.
That amendment was lost, so it's going to be on the one that... the vote go back to what? The one that was allowed to...
Mine's a substantive motion again.
So now we're just going to vote on
vote
what
again.
was moved by Councillor Flaherty and seconded by Corbin Price. All those for the amendment? And all those against? So that amendment's been carried.
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 4, enforcement action. This is for the enforcement action for unlawful erection of a fence at 59 Malden Road in Nelson. Deborah Dawson, if you'd like to speak on this then, please.
Do you want me to start right from the beginning?
No.
Oh, I was just going to give you up photos.
It's all right.
It's fair off, they've got 5 minutes
so
on
it's not like that
speed.
now.
Sorry.
It's
They don't
been chopped
carry any
down.
weight, does it?
Then? They don't what?
Look, photos.
Oh, right. No, they don't actually. Right, it's actually on it's all been cut down so it's a bit more staggered. Yeah? So where you see, oh God. Right, where you
Would
see.
you like to go up on this?
Don't fall off.
No. Oh, right, so from here, that's all gone level, yeah? Then it's all come down there, then it's gone back, all that's gone, yeah? So I've taken quite a lot of it off. You know what I mean?
Do you picture show how much has been taken off or?
Yeah, it's that that tallest bit there, yeah, because that's the bush shelter there, well, should be, yeah, should be. That bit was actually 8 foot, and I've cut it down to 4.
On top of the wall.
Yeah, well, it's not actually on top of the wall.
It's on the draft bit behind
The
the wall,
slats, it's all behind the
But if I was
wall.
standing on the pavement, I'd see the wall and then another 4 feet.
behind the
Yeah.
brick wall.
Yeah. But from the inside, it doesn't look like that.
But from the outside it does.
Yeah, from the outside. It don't look like that now.
So the
but
wall,
from the
wall is
ins-
higher than what we can see then, basically.
Pardon?
The brickwork is higher than what we can see.
Uh,
The fencing comes down in the face of the brick, yeah? Is that what
yeah,
you're
so
saying?
the posts are on the inside,
Yeah.
and then obviously you get your thingies across, and then you get your slats.
So from the pavement, what is the total height now?
I've no idea.
Ah.
They did say, but I'm trying to find the one where I've cut it down. Oh, you can see part of it on that one.
Those telecom things.
So when you look at that,
See, we're really interested from the outside.
Can I just ask a
Yeah.
chairman whilst-
I can see that
Can I ask
there's
one question?
I was gonna say,
yeah, this is from the inside, so my garden goes right up to the wall. Yeah.
But from the outside, we've
You
got
got a new
4
version
feet
of
on
the
top
decision
of
is
the
about the
wall.
planning
Yeah,
application itself.
yeah, so it does, do you
So
know
we
what I
don't
mean?
need to look at
But
this.
from the
It's
inside,
only allowed 6 feet.
well,
Yeah.
This is
yeah,
about whether we should be
listen,
enforcing
I
the
get that.
decision of the council, not
But
reviewing the
I am in
planning
different
application itself,
circumstances to
Chairman.
most
I don't think
people.
we need-
My house is on a hill.
No, yeah.
If you go to the bottom of the house and then you go to the crick of the wall on the outside, there must be at least 10 foot. Easy. Do you know what I mean? So I'm in a difficult situation. I've got 5 children. I've got 21 grandchildren. 9 are autistic. The worst one is, I call him Mr. Lee, he's actually called Caton, which is my Geordie's little lad. He can shimmy up them fences. So, he's escaped. I have the other one, he was, he's nearly 5, he's Caton now. But then there's another one that escaped and all. He was actually in the middle, because it's a crossroad, 2 cars stopped, he escaped. This was before the fence was put up. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not being funny, but Julian said to me as well that I have to remove it or take it basically a metre in, which is like just over 3 foot in it. Now that wall there, the one that goes in where the bush shelter should be, that's already 5 foot in away from the highway. I'm trying to find that photo. Oh, there you go. That one.
Okay. So that's
So
how
as you
it
can
is
see,
now.
and I've also taken it down as well there, so it comes down and then it's all level.
Okay.
Just needs to be painted now. But also what actually annoyed me is that there's other houses in similar situations, obviously not that many, because you're normally on the flat. I actually am on a hill. I can't dig it out because it had cost thousands to put a retaining wall in so that the house didn't fall over. It's all slopes, as you can see in there's another one. That it's all garden, just literally slopes. You can't do anything with
Can
it.
you pass some of those round, please?
Yeah, gonna pass them around, yeah. I'll give you, Gary, just 1 minute.
Not ready to review the planning application.
That's
Chairman.
inside. So where that fence is, yeah, that's at that
I'm with you. I'm
bottom.
with you.
But honest,
I appreciate you've got a problem with the levels inside, haven't you?
yeah. Honestly, there's absolutely, and my grandchildren escaping.
Not jumping on that trampoline and getting out, are they?
No, that's gone, that one. But I see other people. That one's just literally been done.
Oh, that's awful.
Right.
Where's that?
That's at Burnley General Hospital.
Oh,
So
right.
you've got Burnley General Hospital, so if you come out, you look up, there's a school and it's there.
But that's not our authority then.
No,
Excuse me, Deborah, if you don't mind, it's not necessarily answering
I'm
Sarah's
just
separately.
passing these photos
If
around.
you don't mind, could you just sum it up to the full committee so then, because if yours one's supposed to be 5 minutes.
Obviously on walls.
And are they in Pendle?
Yeah.
Where are they? Where are they in Pendle?
Barrowford.
Oh, Barrowford.
Barrowford. They are mine.
Martin.
Delegated powers.
Martin.
They are mine.
I think we're going to give delegated powers there.
That one actually is no good. Yeah. And that
Pass it back to Laura.
all that.
Yeah, Deborah, please just sum it up, please, to the full committee then, please.
Basically, I don't want to remove the fence because the safety of my grandchildren, I have to help my children, yeah? Jodie is lucky if she gets 4 hours kit. Do you know what I mean? I've got all Caton's assessments for his autism. He was diagnosed at first of being 12 to 18 months, but as he's getting older, they've had to re-diagnose him and he's at the age now of 6 to 9 months. So he doesn't understand the commands and stuff like a normal child. He's now going, she's even won an appeal for him to go to a special school. Like I said, I've got 9 autistic. 2 more have been assessed. They obviously can talk, do you know what I mean? So it's not, that's not really an issue, but it's the ones that, do you know what I mean, that I have to look after. Julian keeps telling me, I've got to take it down, he's going to charge me with being a criminal. I am not a criminal. Dorothy, I work with Dorothy's daughter, I'm a carer and a support worker. And I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. It's a fence. None of my neighbours have said anything about the fence. In fact, they want the phone number for Tal, who did the fence, so that they can have their fences better. Do you know what I mean? It's not, do you know, it's silly. It's really silly. And then to be told that I'm going to be charged as a criminal, I am not a criminal. I happen to be a carer and a support worker. Do you know what I mean? Yes, I admit I didn't ask for the permission. I didn't even know you needed permission. But I've got to think about myself and my grandchildren. And they are absolutely important to me. And I'm not getting any younger either. You know, I mean, this fence needs to stay up. I will not physically take that fence down.
That's fine, thank you. Yeah, first of all, Laura, sorry. Yeah.
I think it's probably useful just to draw your attention to certain parts of the report that Neil Watson has prepared on this. The application relates to an enforcement issue. His recommendation is that the applicant is given 7 days to fully comply with the requirements of the enforcement notice, because this has already been to an enforcement appeal, and the planning inspector has already made their decision on this. To make a different decision now, as it sets out in the report, would be to bring the council into disrepute. It would lead to a situation where the council, if challenged, would be maladministering the application of its planning powers, having itself identified public harm, then served an enforcement notice to remedy that harm, requiring the removal of the fence that had independently been confirmed to be the correct application of planning policy and the law, then for unexplained reasons to decide that the whole process was wrong and to not take action would be a perverse planning decision to take. So the recommendation is that the notice should be fully complied with and should be prosecuted without further reference.
Thank you, Councillor Lord.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is a really difficult one, or maybe it isn't, I don't know. I mean, having a look at the pictures, I was quite surprised at the height of the fence. Now, obviously, you're protecting, or you're wanting to protect your vulnerable grandchild, that's understandable.
Not just one, there's a few.
But I've seen gardens where they're running nurseries, childminders, tiny ones, one on North Valley Road, I don't think it's there now, but they had a fence and it was half the size of that because there are rules of the height of the fence that you can have. And I think if you're saying you are not going to take that fence down, I don't really think that's the right thing to say. I think you're probably going to...
I'm not saying...
No, let me finish.
Sorry.
You're probably going to land in more trouble than, you know, if you can think of any ways round this without getting into trouble, that would be the last thing you want. That's the last thing anybody wants for you to have. I sympathise with you. You know what I do. I sympathise fully with you. You want to protect your grandchildren. But if everybody did that, you know, it's just not fair, really, to everybody else that goes by the rules.
I would just, all I was going to say was, I'm indifferent. If I was lived next door, completely different. If I lived next door at Christine's, completely different. My circumstances are not like normal people's because of the wall and the garden.
Your circumstances don't come into this legally.
Can I ask a question actually? Because
Sorry.
you've obviously got children and grandchildren. You've obviously lived there for a number of years.
No.
No?
No.
Well, my question was going to be, what was there before? Because obviously that's a new fence.
Just the wall. My mum lived there on her own.
Right.
My mum passed away 12 months ago. She would have, obviously, she would have been 81 now.
So you've only just moved in there then?
No, I ended up moving in with my mum.
Right.
Because I went to move and I had ended up having a nervous breakdown. So I moved in with my mum 7 years ago.
Okay.
So I started doing, you know, I didn't put that fence up without my mum's permission.
No, I'm just
You know
wondering
what I mean?
I just
I
wondered
don't-
how you coped before with the children and grandchildren with no
I
fence
didn't
there.
live there. I lived at 50 Roland Avenue.
Okay.
And my daughter's now in there. See, it just throws me because the house is actually on a hill. I don't know what anybody wants me to do you know what I mean? Because I've explained it. Julian said take it 3 foot in. That'd look absolutely horrendous. Then when I went to the last meeting at Bradfield,
Sorry, Councillor, it's part of your question.
Yeah, it's fine.
they wanted me to paint it. Do you know what I mean? And so obviously, which I can do. But I just fear. It's just the fear of the kids getting run over when I've got him.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and I think it's already been covered by Councillor Lord. I was just going to again refer members to the report that there is case law that personal circumstances, although may influence you on a personal level, you can't take that into account because it's not a planning consideration. So I just wanted to draw members' attention to that.
Okay, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, Laura, a question for you, please. I think you said that, I haven't read the full history again, as I said earlier, apologies, I've substituted onto the committee. But did you say it has gone through an appeal? And it's been lost? Just saying. So was there a retrospective planning application as well, or not? It's just gone straight to appeal based on no application to begin with?
Yeah, it's an enforcement notice.
Thank you.
The inspector has then said that the application, that the fence would be of a poor design, and it would be deleterious in terms of its impact.
Thank you. So Councillor Stone lives quite close to this your property, and we went past this evening, and I agree with what Dorothy said, and the sentiment that you had there. Planning's there for a reason. Everybody has to abide by it.
I get that, and I do apologise.
No, it's all right. I wasn't looking to overemphasise the point.
No.
Everybody has to comply with the rules, and driving past the property today, it is on a very steep bit of the road. You go down Hallam Road?
Yeah.
Yep, down Hallam Road, and then that sort of, again, not to insult you while you stood in front of us, it does whack you in the face coming down the hill. It's so prominent and large, and we're not here to discuss the application itself, so I'll move on swiftly. But it is, I do agree with the inspector and the decision that was made there. Sadly, it absolutely whacks you in the face, and it's so prominent on such a prominent junction as well. It's a huge open junction, and it's just there. I don't know what you could do to it to make it look better, but that's for another, perhaps a planning application.
Paint it.
Yeah, perhaps a planning application that complies with Julian's advice at a later date would be the right way to go, as Dorothy was saying. You know, you've got to do it right. I agree with the report. I agree with the sentiment, and just to add time, I'll move that we agree. I don't know what the phrase should be, but that we agree with the report, and that we should do the recommendation. So thank you, Laura.
I'll second that.
Do we have any more speakers on that?
I think that there needs to be a certain amount of common sense applied, really. Deborah didn't know she had to apply for planning permission. An awful lot of people don't know that they have to apply for planning permission for fences, and there are ones fairly recently that have put in an application retrospectively and it's gone through. I know I've spoken to Deborah because she's in my ward. At the time that all this went through, that she was initially told to take the fence down and whatever, she was grieving the loss of her mother, so she didn't actually understand what was going on, to be honest with you. I just think a little bit of common sense needs to apply, and possibly Deborah could be asked to put in a retrospective planning thing with an amended fence, with an amended layout, rather than just going, right, we're going to prosecute you. Because not everybody's on the ball with everything all the time, depending on their own life circumstances at the time.
Chair, could I make it clear that through the appeal process it's been possible to set out what the case is and what the circumstances are of this case? The applicant has had opportunity to do that,
Right.
and that's not been the case. So that's why enforcement action has been taken. And you've seen this evening, the applicant has said they intend not to take the fence down. So our alternative is to take enforcement action.
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly what Laura's just said, just that the appeal against the enforcement notice is the equivalent of a planning application which has been refused.
Councillor Cover-Price.
Just to say that it's not that we're not sympathetic people or we're not caring people, but ultimately it's been drilled into us that whatever happens to you, that precedent has been set on Hallam Road or in Nelson or in Pendle, and everybody then has to live with it wherever they are, and the circumstances that precipitated it, they've moved on. That's changed, and so that's why, although we're often sympathetic, we have to just look at the planning, and it's really, really clear. All the bits I've highlighted in green in here. And it's been to appeal, so it's really clear that an expert has said that this cannot go ahead and we must enforce. It couldn't be clearer, whatever the sad circumstances. And I totally get it with the hill as well. I mean, I see that. We can't take that into account.
Thank you, Councillor Lord.
We can't take into account what I'm going to say now, and I agree with you, Sarah, there, but from another point of view, somebody like Deborah that comes along here that doesn't know all the ins and outs like we do is terrifying, absolutely terrifying to some individuals, you know, but like Sarah says, we can't think like that. We might do when we get home. We might think, oh, you know, what have we done there? But, you know, this is how it is. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate personal circumstances, and you've been very passionate, and thank you for bringing along and explaining the situation. As Sarah said, however, we are constrained by the law in this case, and by the requirements of the planning situation, and unfortunately we have no choice but to enforce the law and the planning situation, and I'm conscious as well that you know, there is a risk that the council is brought into disrepute if we make an inappropriate decision, and unfortunately therefore I feel that we have no choice but to support the recommendation.
Any other speakers?
Just summarise. I just want to reiterate to the speaker there as well, just in summary, that totally get the personal circumstances, but as colleagues have highlighted, that's not the way. I think just to recommend for yourself.
Sorry, are you talking to me?
I was just making a comment, but yes.
Like we're talking to
I would say before we go to the vote, liaise with the planning officers. Liaise with the planning officers and put in an application after this evening, depending on how this goes, that complies with the rules in place. So that, I think we have to follow, as I've already said, the recommendations.
Any other speakers before we move to vote? That's fine. We take the vote on the actual recommendation which has been set out. All those for the recommendation? And all those against? That's fine. So the recommendation has been carried. That's it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Is there nothing else to try?
Thank you.